Huge news from an actual Sync Academy member just dropped on us the other day, and I don't want to actually reveal what the news is. I'm going to actually let this member come on to my channel, and he's going to talk about the news that he just received just the other day through his BMI statement. So I want you guys to meet Mark Henley, and I will put a link to his website below. You guys should definitely go check him out. Some incredible music, some great stuff that he's been up to. He has been in the sync game for a while, and he has been working his butt off. Okay, these kind of results do not come overnight. I want to make sure you guys are all very clear on that. But when I heard his great news, I just had to put him on here because I want you guys to see that this stuff is actually possible. So Mark, welcome, man. Why don't you go ahead and let us know what your great news is?
Cool. Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, yesterday was BMI day. And when I saw my statement, it kind of confirmed that this is going to be the year that I'm going to be able to quit my day job, which is super exciting.
That is incredible, man. Now you've had some royalties coming in for a while, right? This wasn't your first royalty check.
Correct. Yeah, this was my sixth royalty check.
So that is, that just completely gave me goosebumps because I remember that feeling that I had, many years ago. It was about 2.5 years, 3 years into my career where I started to feel that sort of, hey, this is actually going to work and maybe I can kind of slow down some of my other obligations. Now, I'm going to dive into the details here in terms of how you got to this place. So we're going to kind of do a sort of Tarantino thing. We're going to start at the end and we're going to kind of work our way back. So what have you been doing the last year in 2019? What were you doing in your sync licensing career? What were some of the things that you think led you to this point where this royalty check gave you that confidence that this could be your full-time job?
Well, 2019, I was kind of continuing what I was previously doing, which is I found a good, few really good exclusive libraries that I was mainly feeding and just kept feeding the pipeline and kept putting in the work, pumping out tracks, and just kind of trusting the advice that I had been given by your channel and other mentors that I found in various communities, and just more going on faith than anything because my royalties were kind of going up and down. But now when I got this check, it was like I don't have to like go on faith anymore. Like this is real. Like this is happening, which is like the greatest feeling ever.
It's so funny you say that because that's absolutely how I described it all those years where it was like, okay, $50. All right, let's just keep going. And I remember it was just faith. It was like, I think it's going to work. I just believe in it. It's going to work. I'm going to keep doing this. And like you see, you get some of the bigger ones, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. But eventually you should start to see if you're doing it right, as you've been doing it, where you're partnering with exclusive libraries, you're serving their needs, you're constantly supplying, building up your catalog and talking to them on a consistent basis. You will see this kind of breakthrough moment where it starts to feel like, oh, okay, aha, now we're starting to see the kind of income that can actually support me and maybe even support my family and start to allow me to do this 100%. Now, I know that you have some other gigs that you're doing, and I did as well when I was getting started. If you guys watching this don't know, I was doing a lot of freelance video work actually because my day job at the time for many years was doing shooting and editing of video. Very simple stuff. I'm not a master of any of those skills, but just enough to be able to do a couple of corporate gigs, that kind of thing. And so what I found from my career is as I first got started in licensing, it was like 80 to 90% independent contract work, video work, and 10 to 20% I could fit in some music time. But as the years went on and I started to actually increase my royalties, increase my fees and all that kind of stuff, that 80% went down to 60 and now 40% was working on music. And it basically just was a spectrum, this sliding thing that just kind of happened until the point where it was like, one video gig a year. That's all I would do because I was like, you know what? I'm doing well with the music stuff. So what are some of the other gigs that you've used or you've had in the last couple of years that have helped, support you and keep you afloat during this process?
So the last few years, so I got into sync licensing in 2016, and so for the last 3 years, I've actually had a full-time day job working 45 to 50 hours a week. And so I actually kind of did it the opposite way you did, where royalties were the first way that I actually started making decent money. But now, because of like my credits and I've kind of put myself out in the community and people are starting to see me, I'm starting to get approached with other types of gigs and opportunities that could bring in some more upfront money. So I actually started with the royalties, but now I'm realizing there's some other gigs that I could be doing that I could replace my day gig income with, and then kind of supplement the royalties until the royalties can be enough to, only live off those.
Nice. So what kind of gigs are these that you're getting offered?
So obviously, as you go forward and with sync licensing, you start to get in with exclusive libraries that pay upfront for tracks. So that's one, getting a few upfront. Commissioned albums. And then over the last year, but mostly the last like 6 months in particular, I've had different artists and people in the same community coming and asking me what my rates are for production or for mixing and mastering. And that's something I've always kind of politely declined. You know, I've said, like, I don't want to mix other people's music. Like, I'm not a mixing engineer. Like, I don't think of myself that way at all. It's just something that I've learned out of necessity because, and I can go into that more if you want, but I've just been getting approached more and more. And now I'm starting to see people who do this full time. And it's like, oh, I could easily do that. Like, I could make the same amount of money for my day gig producing and mixing for other people, and that would actually help my craft, or like, because my day gig is not related to music at all.
That's awesome, man. And I think obviously your talent and your product is speaking for itself, and that's why you're getting reached out by all these people are reaching out to you and asking for help with what you're doing. I want to actually talk about also. If you can maybe point out some of the things that you did that were not helping you get to this point, because I know that you obviously have a success story on your hands and you're on your way. Of course, you have a long journey ahead of you still, but I want to maybe talk about, are there some things that, looking back over the few years that you've been doing this, that you realize, you know what, that didn't help me that much, or that kind of got in my way, or that's something I wish I would have known maybe on day one, so that, anybody watching this interview or this video and they're just getting started, they don't make the same mistakes. If you guys have watched any of my videos before, it's pretty much the huge theme of my entire YouTube channel, which is like all the stupid stuff that I did in the very beginning and not taking it seriously enough and not looking out for myself and not understanding agreements and contracts and how to partner and a good strategy for partnering with libraries, or how to create licensable music, and all the things that I've talked to you guys about. So Mark, what are some of those things that you might be able to kind of pay it forward and let the next group of composers and producers know about this industry before they get started?
Sure. So as far as like contracts and pairing with the right libraries, I never had problems with that because I luckily found some great mentors right when I got into this industry. But there are things like procrastination disguised as productivity. So like getting lost for days on end watching YouTube tutorials and thinking that that's being productive, but really you're just procrastinating, or going to school for music and racking up a six-figure debt that's like completely, put me down a certain path financially, or just the idea that you need all the different plugins and like, oh, once I buy this plugin, then I'll be able to do it. And I mean, a lot of financial mistakes is what I've learned. And that's another, I know you've had another video in the past where you talk about, yes, it's great to focus on your income, but why don't you lower your expenses too? And that's like a big, huge part of why I'm going to be able to quit my day job, is because, well, and obviously I've been working a lot of overtime at my day gig the last few years, and I've been knocking out my debt as fast as I can. But I've also got my monthly expenses as low as I could possibly get them, so that like financial freedom point is much lower than it used to be.
Very smart, guys. If there was one thing to pay attention in this video, it was right there. We always think about, we need more, we need more, we need more. But the other side of the equation is always forgotten about. What can I get rid of? What do I not need? How can I lessen my sort of expenses so that this can actually become my full-time gig sooner? If those of you are wanting this to become your full-time gig sooner, you got to decide, what's more important to you: having things that aren't necessary and having, a lifestyle that might be more expensive, or making music full time. It is basically a choice. If you want to keep your current lifestyle with all the expenses and stuff that you could probably get rid of, it just means that path of, or that timeline to get to the point where you can do this full time will just be much further in the future. So same with you. I was always about, like, I want roommates and I want to lower my stuff, and I tried to live as cheaply as possible and have zero debt as much as I could. But that's really wise of you to be getting out of debt and not be paying the interest and all that kind of stuff. It's really, really smart, man. Really cool. How about working with libraries? Have you had just only great experiences working with libraries? Have there been some libraries where you're like, this kind of thing, I didn't like that, how they were working with? How is your, like, how many libraries have you worked with in total? And what have been some of the differences you've noticed between maybe the ones that have been more active for you and the ones that haven't?
Sure. So over the entire course, I think I've probably had music in or corresponded with maybe a dozen. And right now I'm down to maybe 4 or 5 that I'm actively writing for. Uh, what I've preferred, and like, so I've been going out to LA once a year. And so most of the libraries I write for, except for one, I've met face to face. I've hung out with them. We have a personal relationship. Like, I'm friends with them on social media. I have phone calls with some of them. And so the ones that I've kind of drifted away from are the ones that where you're just kind of like one composer in a huge sea of composers, and it's like not really personal. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, everyone has their own approach. Like, some people make great money in those libraries, but for me, it's like when I know I'm emotionally invested in my publisher and they're the same for me, we know each other's lives, and like, it's, to me, that's just a huge benefit. It's a relationship. It's not just like some cold business deal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, and they need to know who you are. I would agree with you. Maybe somebody does well with these kind of libraries where you're just, I call them kind of catacall things, where there's 10,000 people on the website and you're just submitting to, one opportunity, and so are all of them. Or you just put your music on their site and they don't really know who you are because they sent you a link to create an anonymous account, and they don't really have any sort of personal investment in who you are. And like you said, you fly out there, and which is really, really smart. And they know you and they care about your career. And I think it's the same thing with, I was kind of getting into the world of sync agents this last, late 2019. And the big thing I learned about sync agents is that, they're primarily for the artist that's building a fan base and wanting to tour and that kind of thing. But they need to be like a fan of you, the fan of your work, if they're going to really go to bat for you and become your advocate. Because what gets them out of bed in the morning is realizing, I want to help break this artist, right? That's kind of their little ego driver that they like to do. And I think libraries are something similar to there, where if they know you, they care about you, you have a relationship with them, they want you to do this full time. If you want to do it full time, they really want to support you, and they want to be the one to brag, to say, hey, I helped this producer or this writer do this full time. It's a really rewarding thing for them to be able to put you in that position through the opportunities that they can provide to you. So that's why I've definitely told you guys, and I think I'm, it's obviously here showing clearly with Mark's example, that you got to have relationships with these people. Mark has all these people in his phone. He has all their email addresses, and he's emailing them on a continual basis. How is your how does your life work at this point? Because you still have the day job, and obviously you're thinking about getting out of that. Can you walk me through your schedule, like from a week to week? Are you being asked to compose specific music for briefs, or do you sort of have a sort of a rhythm where you're just constantly cranking out like album after album for them? How does that work with the different libraries you work with?
Sure. It's kind of changed and evolved throughout the process. So when I first started out, my first library was through a cold submission. And so then I submitted 2 tracks and they got accepted. And they asked me to do an album instantly. I freaked out, but said yes, because I was just like, I know this is what I have to do. Cranked out the album. And that one got me my first placements a couple months later. And so they just, I think they were just sending me briefs at that point. So I just kept writing, got in with another library. And so that first library I get with, they'll send briefs not to all their composers, but they kind of know like which composers fit which shows and which briefs. So they'll send out briefs where, you can send in as many tracks for that opportunity, or continually writing albums, because you obviously where they're pitching, so you know what they're doing. And then I have other libraries who they'll have like a submission portal, and so they'll have all of their current briefs, and so you could submit track by track or do full albums. And I mean, it's all a little bit different, and so it's kind of changed throughout my process. As far as the schedule goes, that's kind of changed too. So my day job, I have to get up pretty early, and then I get off in the late afternoon. So I've gone, when I first started, I was just working late at night and staying up late, waking up groggy, not feeling healthy. And I kind of went through the phase of waking up at 4 every single day, and I did that for months and months, and kind of gone back and forth. And I found that when I wake up early in the morning and I'm productive before work, so I'll get up at like 4, start a track, go to my day gig. When I get home, I already know there's something started, so I have that much more incentive to go back and finish, keep working on that, and then go to bed early, and obviously get in a routine. And you've touched on that on your channel too, just living a more healthy lifestyle, and in the long run, it's the way to go.
Yeah, and time management, the kind of what I'm hearing you say is that you have so many obligations, you have so many things you got to get done, not to mention your day job, but 4 or 5 different libraries. One thing I do want to put out there to make sure people are aware of, that you don't want to have so many libraries that like everybody gets a little disappointed, right? Like, so if you were working with 5 libraries and you feel like, almost all the time you have to kind of pass on their opportunities because you're so busy with other ones, I think that's probably a recipe that you're going to be burning all the bridges. So, Mark, obviously you can, be the judge of your own schedule. And if you feel like based on who you're working with, you can keep up with them. I know that similar for me, there's about a wider circle of 4 or 5 libraries that I'll be in contact with, throughout a given year or 2 of my career. But really it's about probably 2, sometimes just 1, that I'm just like constantly, like every week they need new stuff. So I want to make sure everybody's just aware of that, at least my 2 cents on that, just to make sure you don't, because I think there's that tendency for people to think, well, if 1 library is good, I should work with 10 libraries, right? That's the risk you run, though, is that if they all come to you in 1 week and need music from you, there's only so many hours in the day, there's only so many people you can serve, and you don't want to start disappointing people very quickly in the industry. So just make sure you're very selective, and keep those numbers. I say 2 or 3 in the beginning. Maybe as you start expanding more and you start learning how to crank out tracks much quicker or faster, like Mark does now, you can start going into those larger numbers. And not every library will be active every single week. I'm sure Mark would back me up on that. That some libraries, they'll be hitting you up for a month and then tons and tons of stuff, and then it'll be kind of just crickets for a couple of months. And then, so that's why having maybe 2 or 3 in your back pocket is a great way to go. So that if somebody goes kind of dark on you for a little bit, just, whatever, it happens, or slow, it's the times of this business, there's something else you can be doing. And lastly, I want to say, if all of your library partners kind of go quiet on you and there's just not much going on, you should not be, and not at you, Mark, you already understand this, but for everybody watching, you should not be sitting on your thumbs waiting for somebody to tell you to do music. That's the time where you need to be building up your next catalog, your next album, putting together some sort of a project that you can start pitching to one of those libraries. So I know that sometimes that when we are in this sort of employee mode, where we're kind of used to, you show up to a place, your boss tells you what to do, there's guidelines set up, there's a deadline, right? And you get your paycheck. And that's kind of how our professional lives look for many times. But in the licensing industry, you don't always have the deadline. You don't always have the brief. You don't always have that structure that you need to get stuff done. So I want to make sure everybody understands that if you're going to call yourself a music producer, you better be every day, whether or not there's a brief or not. You better be producing music of some sort. You better be working on something, expanding maybe your palettes, learning about a new plugin, trying to learn a new DAW, whatever you feel can really speed up your process and improve your productions. You should be always doing that. So, well, Mark, I want to thank you so much again for your time today, man. If you have any sort of parting words of wisdom for anybody just getting started, or maybe in that point right now, or maybe you were last year and the year before, where you're kind of, you're in that faith zone of like, is it going to work out? Is it not? And this is the hardest, I think this is the hardest part of this business, is that little, it's a year or two, it could be 3 years, 4 years. It could be a long time where you're like, I'm seeing something, but it's not enough for me to go like 100% it's going to work out. So you have to go into that faith mode. Any bits of advice or insights you can give to somebody in that space right now?
Sure. I mean, on top of that, I'd say number one, get your finances in order. I've already touched on that. But number two, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And the one thing that's really helped me is to break huge things down into tiny steps. And instead of thinking like, oh, in 5 years, I want to be making this much. Well, if your goal is 5 years away, it's really easy to take off today. You're like, oh, I got 5 years to get that done. So if you can break it down into daily goals, like I want to spend this much of time on music every day, I want to get this many tracks done every single week, then you know exactly every day what you have to get done, and you can't take that day off. So, and that's been a huge thing for me.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Very, 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 very wise words there. I do think that everybody watching is going to get a lot of insight out of that. So congrats, Mark. Best wishes to you moving forward. I hope even your next check is even bigger than the last one, and you continue this progress. And I do hope that this year can be the year you actually commit to this 100%, or at least get out of the day job, so that'll free up a lot of free time for you. And if you have to do some independent work here and there, that could be something you can schedule around your music producing. So I wish everything, nothing but the best for you moving forward in your career.